friends, this is Logan Jacob. For today's video, this is a video that I've wanted to create for quite a while. I kind of did a AUM Basics video talking about some of the techniques that I use a few months ago, and it was pretty popular, one of my most popular videos. And I've also seen some comments in some of the threads around Facebook and Reddit just saying, you know, I wish there was a class I could take on AUM on how to get the ins and outs. Because it is a very different type of DAW or DAW than some of the other stuff you may be used to. And I thought, well, this would be a good chance for me to flex some of my teacher muscles and maybe show you guys some basics and hopefully give you some of the information that I wish I had been able to find when I first got started with AUM about a year ago or so. So that's what this is. This is an AUM Basics video, and today's video is basically from the very beginning. You just installed AUM, and you want to get started with it, but it's complicated, it looks weird, and you want to figure out how to get going with it. So that's what we're going through today. If you're an advanced user in AUM, you can probably skip this, although I've had comments from folks that say, you know, it's nice to see another person's workflow, or maybe you might learn one or two things that you didn't know before. So hopefully this is helpful for you. Leave a comment down below if you want to see more of these. Please be sure to subscribe and like the channel and all of that good stuff. If you don't mind, that'll help me out a lot and let me know that somebody's actually listening and watching these things. And also, if you are an advanced AUM user and there's something that I miss or something that I do that you think you have a more efficient way of doing it, please be sure to comment on that. And of course, if you have any AUM tutorials or tutorials about making music on the iPad at all, please link those in the comments below. I'd love to pass those on to my subscribers and recommend your videos out. I know there's a lot of really great channels out there for folks to find information. So I'd like to share that stuff as much as possible. Okay, so let's get started with it. Like I said, this is an AUM Basics video from the very beginning. I'm going to assume that you just bought AUM and you might have a few audio units from using things like Beatmaker or any of the other apps out there, maybe even GarageBand or something. But you've seen AUM around and you want to give it a try. So what's this whole thing all about and how do I get started with it? So when you first open up AUM, you're going to see something pretty similar to this. Now, I do have one channel open here already to record my microphone. You can ignore that. So when you first open it, you'll just have this little box here. So you may notice right off the bat that this is a different kind of digital audio workstation, or DAW or DAW, depending on who you are. It doesn't look like Ableton. It doesn't look like GarageBand. It doesn't even really look like Beatmaker or Cubasis or any of those other ones out there. This is a completely different and new kind of DAW, a new kind of workflow. And AUM, the developer Kymactics calls it a mixer for iPad iOS. And that's essentially what it is. It pulls up channels just like you would have in a hardware mixer, or like you would have inside of Logic or something like that if you go to the mixer view. So you've got these mixer channels with faders, as you can hear my voice dipping out as I play with the fader. And then from there, you can load in all of the sounds and everything else you want. So let's get started with it. So the first thing you need to do is click on the plus sign, and you've got a couple of options. You have audio, MIDI, or import. So the very first thing that I want to do is start with some basic audio. So let's say you're a guitar player or a keyboardist and you want to plug your hardware into AUM and just record it. Well, that's perfectly fine. So what you're going to do here is you're going to click on the plus sign up here and go to hardware input, and you should see all of your different inputs. Now I'm using a Tascam 4x4. It has 4 input channels that can either be a 1-2 stereo split or 3-4 stereo split, or 4 channels of mono. So I've got my mic into channel 1, which you can see up here, USB 1. For channel 2, I'm going to hook up my circuit mono station. I have a Novation circuit mono station, which is a cool little synth. So I've got that in that channel, and if I play a couple notes, you can hear it, and then I can even hit my sequence. and you can hear that the mono station is coming through there just fine. If you have a guitar, an acoustic guitar or an electric guitar, you can run straight in to your USB interface and you can record directly there. But another great thing about this is that it lets you add all kinds of different effects into this channel. So let's say that I have a sequence set up on my mono station and I want to, I have a sound that I like, but I want to add some effects to it. So these plus signs over here are where you insert your effects. So I'll hit the plus sign here and you have a bunch of different options. Now AUM comes with some hardware, some built-in effects. You've got some stereo processing to be able to do a stereo to mono mix or some panning, whatever you need to, invert or phase, whatever you need to. Filters, a couple of basic EQ filters, parametric EQ, all that kind of stuff. Some basic compression and peak limiting. You've got these bus sends, which I don't want to get into in this video just yet. And then the multi-bus audio instances, which we'll talk about it on a later video. That's getting a little more complex. So if I'm just going to add in effects, I usually will use my audio unit extensions. As you can see, I've got quite a few here. Some of them are free. Some of them are paid, but none of them are terribly expensive. And that's the beauty of creating music on iOS. You know, you get into VSTs if you're using a Mac or a PC, and these VSTs are $100, $150, $300 a piece, whereas some of the best effects that I've ever picked up in iOS were 10 or 15 bucks. I love being able to spend so little money and get such powerful stuff out of it. And I think more people are going to be doing this here in the future. So one of my favorite effects, I've got some freebies here from Blamsoft, the DC9 overdrive, the F16 filter, and the zero reverb. So of course a mono bass synth is always going to sound great with some reverb. So we'll start with that one. So I just drop it in there and now I've got my reverb. And if I click on it, it looks just like a VST that you might be used to from somewhere else. And I add a little bit of reverb to it. And of course I've got parameters that I can control. Whatever I need to do there. Now let's say I don't just want reverb. I want to put a little bit of delay or something on there. I use a ton of delay in my music. So how do we do that? So to be able to get to the other effects, to be able to add more, we're just going to click on this. It's hard to do with a mouse, so I'm going to do it with my finger. We're just going to drag up by holding the effect that we've already got and dragging our finger up, or you can do that anywhere on this line as well. And you'll see this little +1 will pop up down here in the bottom. So if I click on that +1, now I have another channel. I can go ahead and add a few if I know that I'm going to want to put in a few more effects. So then I click on that, go to my audio unit extension, and let's say that I want to put a little bit of delay on it, and I'll use the Bleece delay. Some of my favorite apps are from Bleece. I use them all the time. There's a bundle you can get that has a delay, a reverb that's really good. It has a sidechain compressor, and what's the other one? Bleece. Oh, the filter, yeah. And the filter is really great as well. I'll actually use that in just a second. So we can have a little bit of delay here, and we can control all the parameters. All the Bleece effects have this sort of GUI to them, so they look really cool. So now I've got both reverb and delay. Now let's say that I want to go to a preset that I may have saved. There's a couple of different options. Some of the apps have their own presets built in, and you can get to them there. But then AUM also allows you to save your presets using this little drop-down menu here. So I've got all my factory presets. I haven't actually built any personal presets for Bleece delay yet. But you've got all these presets built in here. So I can go to a bright chorus effect. Try that one. I can go to ensemble and I can test out all these different sounds. But let's say that I get one that it's pretty close to what I want, but it may be a little bit heavy. I want to pull the dry wet down a little bit, and let's maybe pull the feedback up some. Sorry if that just blasted you out. And now I want to save that. So if I click on the hamburger menu there or whatever, I can hit plus, and it gives me the option to save it. So I want to call it something different. So let's call it, since I'm Logan Jacob, I'll say LJ delay. And you can either save it directly in the plugin or save it in AUM. I personally like saving it in AUM. And now I've got my user up there, my user plugins right there. So wherever I want, they're automatically saved there. Okay. So now let's say we want to add a filter here. We'll go ahead and throw in another one. And you can add in just as many of these audio units as your iPad can handle, or your iPhone if you're using an iPhone. The thing you need to watch for is this DSP button, this DSP display up here, where it's showing what percentage of your digital signal processor you're using. When that starts getting up a little bit higher, that's when you know that you've got to be careful. You're going to start getting clipping and all that other stuff. Now, we noticed a minute ago when I started playing that it blasted out a little bit, and I could turn down the volume physically on the mono station, but then we've also got this fader here, so we can duck it down a little bit so that it's not getting in the way. That's a little more manageable. So now I've got a filter on it. Okay, and I'll talk in a little bit about how to change that filter up however I want to and be able to use it. So that's my basic hardware input. Now, let's say that I've got some built-in synthesizers. How do I get to those? So the same idea, we're going to add an audio track because that's going to be where we're hearing sound from. And then I'm going to go to audio unit extensions, and then I've got my list of all of my different synthesizers or plugins, all my different AUs that I might want to add in here. So I'm going to use the Moog Model 15, one of the first ones that I bought. I absolutely love the sound. It's very classic Moog. It looks like the classic Moog system. You know, you've got your 904A filters and all of that good stuff. So here I am in my classic Moog system. I've gone to a preset, which is, I like the S&H style pads that are built into it. Now, once you have your software synth pulled up, there's a few different things that you can do. Now, first off, you notice that with most of the apps, they resize to kind of fit your screen however you need to. And this one has some different things built in. It'll show you different keyboards, the arpeggiator, the ribbon, you know, and that's one. This isn't a tutorial of Model 15, so I'm not going to dig into too much detail there. But you can see how it all kind of fits right there. Now, if I want to actually play the app, I have a few different options. AUM has a built-in keyboard that is real easy to add to each of these to kind of test out your sound. So if I click on this keyboard button here, it pulls up this little virtual keyboard, and I can test it out. And I've got a few different options here. I can, I've got some settings which shows me where that keyboard destination is going, and then MIDI channel, center velocity, all that stuff. I've got this infinity button, which is a hold button. So I can do whatever I need to there. And then if I have this button clicked, then I can grab a note and drag it, and I get a wider range on the keyboard. So that's pretty handy. I mean, it works out pretty well. I've been able to, if I'm, in the car or on a bus, or if I'm out in the woods camping or something, to be able to just pull it up, and I don't have one of my hardware keyboards with me. You can get some decent stuff. But I have big old fat bass player fingers, so I have a hard time hitting all those correctly. So I like to use a hardware keyboard. And I'm assuming that if you're into electronic music, you probably have a hardware keyboard somewhere that you can hook up to it. So I'm going to hit the hide button right here to get rid of that keyboard. And I can make it pop up whenever I want to by clicking on the keyboard there. And now we're going to start talking about MIDI routing. We've not done any of that yet. So anytime you see this kind of swiggly backwards S symbol, that is our MIDI routing symbol. And you can get to it from within each app, or you can get to it from within the hardware, from within the software itself, from within AUM. So if I click on this within the app, this is basically what is going to control this synthesizer, what's going to control this app. So as you can see here, I've got a Novation launch key up here, and I'm going to click on that, and that just lets it know that my MIDI keyboard is now going into this app. Okay, and I'm going to turn off the hardware keyboard there, and you notice that that went back to orange. So I can just click it back on if I want to. So now I've got my launch key hooked up. And I can control the synthesizer with my keyboard, which for me is a lot easier. And there's some other handy stuff that you can do there, and I'll show you some of that in a minute. So that's just kind of the basics of how do I get this thing going with my keyboard. And again, we can do the same thing. I love to put a good reverb on my Moog synth, so I'm going to use the Bleach reverb this time. And I'll bring it down to about 30% dry wet. So you get the idea there. You can now hear all of that stuff, and I can go through this same process and add in whatever digital effects I want to here. So that's for a built-in audio unit. Now, if you've been using iOS for making music for a while, you're probably familiar with inter-app audio. That's kind of an older setup that's going away, but it is one that is still used a little bit. So you can do the same thing as you can with an audio unit extension, but using inter-app audio. So I do have a few apps that are only available through inter-app audio. So for instance, the Animoog is one that is only there for inter-app audio that I can play with. And Patterning 2 is another. This is a great drum app that is only available for inter-app audio at the moment. So I'm actually going to go ahead and do that. And I'm going to just do the main output of Patterning. Now, one of the handy things about Patterning is that it uses Ableton Link. So you should have seen that little pop-up happen up there. And if you notice over here, this little chain link popped up, and that lets me know that Ableton Link is on and is connected. So Patterning 2 and AUM are now talking to each other, and you can actually see the sequence starts to roll here so that they stay in tempo with each other, and they'll start together. And if you want to turn Ableton Link on and off, you just click on your tempo, and it drops this thing down here, and click on the three dots, and you've got Ableton Link enabled. Okay, and you can, whether it's synced and what it's synced by, if it's by bar or beat or 2 bars or however you want to do. I think the smallest you can do is by 1 bar. Whether you want to have a pre-roll on, so if you click record, it'll give you a count in. Your time signature, all that stuff is all here. And of course, you can change your tempo here. I don't like actually that it changes by decimal points. I would rather just go by a whole number. What I usually do is double click on the number itself and put my metronome in there. I like 80 BPM. Of course, you can tap in your tempo however you want to there if you want, and then you can turn your metronome on and off here. Okay, so I've got my inter-app audio. Now when I click on Patterning, it actually just pulls up my Patterning app, and I've got a little drum pattern here. If I go over here, I'll see that it's receiving a clock. So Patterning itself is set to 72, but the clock is saying 80, so that's actually going to override. And now in here, I can just start my pattern, and I'll be able to listen to it. By the way, that is Bo Beats' new crushed. I can't remember the name of the drum kit that he did. Anyway, it's you can find it on his Instagram. I find a link to it. So I went ahead and made a drum kit with some of Bo Beats' new sounds. I like his stuff a lot. Okay, so now you can see that I've got patterning in here, and I can go ahead and start my pattern here. And then just whenever I'm ready to bring it in Ableton, it'll all be synced up to whatever other MIDI I have going on in here, which is handy. And then, of course, I also have access to all of my effects that we just went through audio units. Let's say I want to do glitch core, and I'll just do a random sequence here. So now that sequence is going. So now glitch core is being a patterning is being affected by glitch core. Which is handy. And of course I can add, whatever I want to, if I want to throw in some overdrive or something. I actually like that sound a lot. I'm going to remember that. And I got to use my finger instead of the mouse. Whatever I want. I could sit here and play all day, but that's not why you're here. Okay, so my effects I can use. I can also use inter-app audio for effects. So, for example, some of my favorites are these like the Frobulator and the Muckraker, and these are also free effects. Muckraker is just a blast. It's such a cool distortion, so I'm going to get that going again, and then go into. You can already hear what Muckraker's doing to it. So since it's inter-app audio, it goes full screen. I can click here to get back to AUM, but then I've got all of my stuff here. Whatever I want to do. Muckraker is really cool, and I do suggest checking that out as a free app. What is the company that makes those? Matthew Caldwell is the designer there, and there's a few different great apps that he's done. Okay, so we've got inter-app audio, we've got our audio unit extensions. We can physically do stuff, but now let's say we want to control our things. We don't want to have to physically play everything that we're doing. I don't want to have to play my keyboard to get that Moog synthesizer sound. I want that to be kind of automated. So we've got MIDI automation in here, which is fantastic. It's probably my favorite thing about AUM. I use it all the time. So if we want to have MIDI control, obviously we need to click on MIDI, and this opens up a MIDI channel, which you can see looks a little bit different. It doesn't have a fader because it's not an audio channel. So it really is just like these effect chains, but it's its own MIDI thing. Now, something that I like to do is if I'm going to be controlling the Model 15 with this MIDI channel, I like to have that MIDI channel next to it. That just kind of cleans it up for me a little bit. So to do that, you can just grab it, drag it down, move it over, and there it is. And you can do that to reorganize whatever you want. If I want to have my bass closer to my drums for whatever reason, then I can do that. And then you can see everything here as you need to. Now, of course, the more tracks you add, the harder it is to be able to see everything. So that is one of the complaints about AUM that I've heard is maybe we can make these faders smaller and have more stuff in there. But I think there's some stuff coming in the future that's going to make that possible, but it is not available right now. Okay, so now I've got this MIDI track. Well, what can I do with it? Well, there's a bunch of stuff we can do with it. One of my favorite sets of audio extensions is the Rosetta Suite. It is from Brambos. Rosetta, these were initially called something else, and I have now forgotten what they were called, but they're now the Rosetta Suite of instruments. He also makes the Ruizmaker drums, which are fantastic. I got Ruizmaker and the Rosetta Suite all in a bundle for very cheap when I first started using this. I want to say it was like $15 for everything. And it's been absolutely great. So you've got an arpeggio or bassline generator, cells, which is essentially a sequencer, and then you've got collider and particles, which are two of my favorite kind of random sequence generators. So we'll show you particles first. The interesting thing about particles is that by default, it's running all the time, even if you're not pushing play. So as soon as you get it linked up, you're going to start hearing what it does. So particles basically is a random note sequencer. You've got these kind of particles floating around, and whenever they hit an edge, it plays that note. And you've got some different, we can get into particles later on in a video, but basically it's creating random notes for me. And I'm going to go ahead and turn up the gate length because I like to have a nice long gate, especially if I'm using a synthesizer, and I'm going to quantize to an eighth note. Now, how do I get Rosetta Particles to talk to the Moog Model 15? There's a couple of ways to do that, just like we did with our keyboard. So we can have Moog Model 15 open, and we can click on the MIDI map, and we can just find particles in there, just like we did with our keyboard. And if I turn it on, you can start to hear the madness kick in there. I'm going to turn that down just a little bit. So that's one way to do it. If I don't want to have to open Model 15, I can click on the hamburger menu to the left of it, and that shows me the same thing. It shows me the MIDI sources. So I can say if I want my launch key controlling it, or I can go ahead and add particles to it. And as we see the notes get closer to the edge, there we go. And then the third way to do it is to pull up this MIDI channel matrix, which is one of the great things about AUM, one of the things I love about it. If I click here at this button on the top, it pulls up this MIDI channel matrix, which is showing me all of my routing, what's connected to what. So obviously we can have multiple things connected to different sources. So I can have, if I had another synthesizer pulled up, I could have my keyboard connected to both so that when I hit a note on my keyboard, it plays through both synthesizers. Or I can have particles controlling my Model 15 and something else that I might want to have hooked up. So the way that you figure this out is that you've got, it's a matrix. So let's say I want Rosetta Particles to go into Model 15. So I find my Rosetta Particles column, and I go down to my Model 15 row, and I click on that square, and there it is. And now you can automatically hear it starts to kick in. So now I've got that external MIDI source controlling Rosetta Particles, and there's a controlling my Moog Model 15. And there's a few different ways you can use that. If you have the Atom piano roll, this lets you actually create a MIDI sequence, and like your traditional piano roll style sequencer. And I'm not used to doing this with my mouse, so this is not good. I don't even know what notes I'm clicking on here. So now I can tell the Model 15 that it wants to read from Atom, and then when I hit start, so now I've got a MIDI sequence set up in there. It doesn't have the grid view like in Ableton, and that's another big complaint about AUM, but it's actually pretty handy to be able to do that. So there's several different MIDI controllers, these MIDI processors. Many you've got here. Fugue Machine is one that I love. Aphelion is one I haven't really dug into too much, but it looks really fun. all kinds of stuff. And then, of course, your audio unit extensions that will all do the same thing. Okay. So now let's talk about, let's say, all right, let me get back I'm going to go ahead and get Collider going so you can see that. So Collider is kind of the same thing. It's a Hadron Collider, which I think is very clever. But as we hit play, you see that all these little hadrons start bouncing around. And right now it's set up so that if they hit a wall, it plays a sound. You can also have it, if they hit each other, it plays a sound. And I'm going to go ahead and send that into the Model 15. And it is more of a pattern, more of a repeated pattern than we have with the particles. Particles is a little bit more random. But, Collider has its uses for whatever you're going into. Now, let's say that I've got that going, and I want to do something else. I want to add another MIDI control to Model 15. So like I did with the effects chains over here, where I kind of drag up, if I do that on my MIDI channel, it gives me that +1 again. And you can add however many little buttons you want to be able to add MIDI controllers to them. Now, I want to do something. I'm a modular guy. I like Eurorack and all that stuff. So I want to be able to control the different parts of the synthesizers or the effects with like an LFO or some other kind of controller. So how do I do that? And I've done a video about this before, but I want to go ahead and show you that in this video as well. So I'm going to go to my audio unit extensions, and I've got the Rosetta LFO, which I love. It was cheap, and it's got 3 LFOs here. And if I hit play, you see them activate immediately. Now, I want these LFOs to control stuff, to control some different things for me. So let's say the first thing that I want to control is the filter over here for my mono station that's going into channel 4 over here. So what I will do is I will go to LFO, and I'm going to tell that to go into our MIDI control, which will allow me to use that LFO to control anything within an AUM. So I'm going to find my MIDI control row right here, and the square for Rosetta LFO. I'm going to click on that. Now Rosetta LFO is going into my MIDI control, and you can also see that my launch key is doing that as well, so that I can use the different knobs and faders on my launch key. But we'll get into that later. So now I want this LFO to control this filter. So if I go to MIDI control in my menu, it pulls up all the stuff that I can do. So in channel 4, now I've got my Blease filter, and you can see there's a menu here for parameters. This is all the stuff that can be controlled via MIDI for whatever I want to do. So let's say for my filter, just basically I want to control the frequency. All right. Now there's a couple of things that I can do here. I can hit learn. So let's say that I have a knob on my Novation that I want to control that filter. So if I hit learn and I turn that knob, it's channel 21 CC or channel 1 CC21. So now if I open this, you can see, now you can't see me twisting the knob, but just trust that I am twisting the knob and it's controlling that the frequency there of that filter. But I don't want to have to do that physically. I would rather do it automatically so I can be focusing on other stuff. So I'm going to have this LFO, I'm going to have this top LFO control the frequency. So this is sending in MIDI channel 1, and it's the top LFO is CC number 13. So if I go here to MIDI channel 1, CC, I'm going to take that down to 13. And now if I hit play, you can see that it's adjusting based on what's going on there. Now I've got that filter on my mono station. So now you can hear that filter kicking in to control that, which is very handy. And I've got 3 LFOs here that I can send to different things. So let's say I also want to control the filter on the Moog. Now, of course, the Model 15 has the 904A filter, which is amazing. So I don't really need to put a Bleach filter or anything on it. I have been guilty of that before, and I've been ridiculed in the comments for it. I understand, yes, but that's okay. So we're going to go to MIDI Control. We're going to find our Model 15. And the Model 15 itself has a ton of parameters that you can change for all the different bits and pieces. So I'm going to go to the 904A cutoff, which is the filter. And the second LFO is 15, is CC15. So if I click on that, now whenever I hit play, or if I bring up the volume of that, you'll hear, and you can see that knob itself physically moving around. Just to give it a little bit of life. And you can control all kinds of parameters with that. I've done some videos with Axon too, where you can see how I'm controlling all the different parameters there. But that's just kind of a basic introduction to how to control things via the MIDI controller. You know, if I want to, one of the handy things that I do with that is, let's say I want to control my faders. I have a Launch Key 49 that has faders built into it. So if I go to MIDI control, and let's say I want to control channel 2, and I want to control the volume. Now, it's automatically set to MIDI channel 3, CC7. I don't know what hardware that's mapped to by default, but I'm going to change it. So I'm going to click on Learn, and I'm going to adjust the fader on my keyboard, and now I have hardware faders. And then I also, my controller has this handy little button underneath the fader that I want to control the mute. So if I hit Learn again and hit that button, and now I've got a mute button that I can control with my keyboard. So that makes it a little bit handier. You're not constantly having to touch the screen. So if you're in a studio or if you're at a desk where you've got some hardware available to do that, you can. It does make things a lot easier there. And that I like doing that, especially if I know that I've got a bunch of channels going. I've got a channel that's going to be way over here and I can't see. I want to be able to control it with a fader that's on my keyboard. So even if I can't see it, I'm controlling the volume that way. Okay, I think I've got one other little trick that I want to show you, and I think I'm going to have to make a couple more channels here just so we can see. All right, so let's say that I've created a bass channel over here. We'll use a Model D, and I'll use the Rosetta bass line. It'll be a good little advertisement for Rosetta. I love those effects. They're some of the best that you can get for the money. Sequencers, effects, all kinds of great stuff to kind of get you started. That's what helped me get started. Okay, so now I'm sending Rosetta bassline into the Model D, and of course I want to test out. Woo! Model D is such a hot app there. There we go. Okay, so let's generate. I'm not gonna go into too much on how to do all this stuff. You can figure that out. Okay, so now when I hit play, I've got this bass line going over here, and then all the way over here, I've got my Moog going. My pads going over here from Collider. I'm going to change some of the... so we don't lose our... Okay. Make it a longer one so that we don't get tired of it too quick. Okay. So now let's say that I want to be able to quickly get over to that bass line. I've got a bunch of stuff going on, but I need to be able to get over there quickly. Well, AUM has this handy little bookmark feature that lets you pick a channel to bookmark, or multiple channels to bookmark. So the way that we do that, if we click on the bookmark thing here, it says you have no bookmark channels. Tap a channel's title and toggle its bookmark button to add it here. So if I click on the Model D title, I'll do that again with the mouse so you can see. Click on the title Model D there. Now I've got this bookmark button. And if I click that, now Model D is in my bookmark menu. So if I go all the way back over here and I do the same thing with Model 15, well, now I can quickly jump between them by hitting that bookmark button. That makes it really handy to get over there really quickly if I need to in the middle of recording a live set. I record a lot of my music live. I don't record and then put it into a DAW and stuff. I like to just kind of do a live performance as if you would on a Euro rack and have that be my recording. So having those bookmarks available to be able to jump back and forth is really, really handy. And then, of course, the home takes you either back to where you were or all the way to channel 1, which is nice. Okay, I think that is everything I wanted to show you in this first video. I know this is kind of a long one, but if you have specific questions about AUM, feel free to reach out to me. You can leave comments down below and I'll answer you, or you can go to Facebook, find me on fb.me/LoganJacobMusic. Or you can search for Logan Jacob Electronic Music on Facebook, and that is my Facebook page. I'll respond to you in Facebook Messenger if you have any questions. Or if there's something you specifically want to see a video about, just let me know, and I'll be sure to throw that in there. I hope you find this video helpful. I hope to continue this series and do more of these basics videos as we get along, and hopefully we can make this software a little bit easier to use for you and get more people out there creating electronic music. In the meantime, keep it up, keep creating music, share your music with me, comment in the post a link to your videos. I'd love to send folks to check them out. I'd love to see them myself. There's so much great music out there. Scrolling through YouTube is so much fun. Finding all the different things that people are using. And I learn something new every day about iOS music and what I can be doing with it based off of what you guys are doing. So keep it up. Go find the good stuff and let me know if you have any questions. Thanks again. Please be sure to like and subscribe, and I will see you next time. Thanks, guys.